Architecture meets tech. Life now at Emerge. Bogdan Zaha, lead architect at Zaha Hadid Bureau. Yevgeny KABANOV, CPO at Bolt. Moderated by Vladimir BATAEV, managing partner at Zaz Ventures.
Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the content sessions, the panels here at Emerge. We're very excited. Again, before we do that, just want to remind you of a few things. Remember, Pine is your Emerge home. There's lots of places you can go in that left sidebar. And that means you can go network, you can join club tables, workshops, etc., etc. Use this opportunity to educate yourself. And also, I want to remind you about the Emerge and Shivas competition. Keep your eyes here on the main stage. When you see a flying spaceship, write down how many times you see it through the day. You should have a number from yesterday. You'll have a number from today by the end of it. And you're going to need to do the same again tomorrow. And then tomorrow, we'll ask you to tell us how many times you saw the flying spaceship. And if you got it right, or if you're the closest, you're going to get a really nice present from Shivas. But we want to get straight into the content. We've got a lot of awesome people here with us today, talking about cities as a product, or what happens when architecture meets tech, such as the way that people interact with urban space, because that's rapidly changing right now, especially with work from home environments. I would like to introduce the moderator of this panel, who will introduce his panelists. Please welcome Vladimir BATAEV, Managing Partner at Zaz Ventures. Over to you, Vladimir.
Thank you much, Stuart. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of Emerge today. And today on the panel dedicated to urban innovation and smart cities, I have the perfect setup. I have Yevgeny KABANOV, the Chief Product Officer and the Head of New Verticals at Bolt, and Bogdan Zaha, Lead Architect at Zaha Hadid Architects. And this is indeed the perfect setup to talk about anything innovative in the cities, because we have a classically trained architect and we have a technologist who is working for one of the most recognizable companies in its domain. And I wanted to jump directly to the smart city story. That's the term that has been all over the place for already quite a few years. And I'd like to ask you, Bogdan, is this term something that you recognize at Zaha Architects, something that you work with, or you think that's a bit of on the side and we have our main line of work to be busy with?
Yes, hi. Well, thank you very much for having me here. And yeah, I think at Zaha Hadid Architects, we like to think of things as being smart in general. So we kind of tend to, do our work around this concept very much. And we do so by actually developing a lot of new techniques and technologies ourselves in which to develop smart geometries and design for cities. So yes.
I can understand you've been using a lot of technology to design things, especially given the complexity that Zaha Hadid is famous for. What is the most amazing piece of technology which you've implemented in the actual final building?
Well, I believe it's more, well, I guess, for an architect, it's kind of a tricky question, let's say, because I guess the more exciting thing is how you get to the product, and the product is the design in itself, and then how that product is reflected in the built environment, which is the building at the end of the day, right? And all buildings that we design, we try to integrate the latest technology in it. But technology per se is not necessarily the end goal of an architect necessarily, but you have to look at so many more things, except the technology which comes into how you fit your house or your architectural program. So I think that we're mostly excited about the tools that we develop to design things, and then whatever is on available on the market to use inside the building to actually fit the purpose of our design, then we integrate it, obviously. And we do that with the help of consultants and with expertise outside of the field of architecture, because usually that's where this expertise actually lies.
You've said something that echoes the theme of our panel, and I wanted to check on this. You said, the building is the product. Is this the way you see it? Is it a product, or is it a service to the actual people that are working or living or doing something else in it, or it's a combination of both?
Well, I think it's it's a bit difficult to coin a term for what a building is, because a building is so much more. At the end of the day, the building needs to fit the purpose for its users, and that's how we see things. I mean, at least in the design process that we actually undertake. So, I mean, the building is the product of a design process. I don't think you can compare it to a car or to another type of product which you then go and sell. Obviously, there's a market for buildings, and that considers the building as a product. But you, as an architect, have to consider it as much more than that. And I mean, I'm sorry to be vague, but I guess we need to I think look at much more specific questions. And I mean,
okay.
just let me just give another example. I mean, just jump in here whenever you think I'm going sideways. I know our time is short, but like one of our ways of looking at the way that we design buildings is, okay, how can we improve the experience of the user? And one such project which I was involved with and still I'm involved with is this thing which we call agent-based parametric semiology. And it's a very sophisticated term, but at the end of the day, what that means is that we try to develop tools to simulate the behavior of people in the actual space that we plan, to better design that space and to actually try to predict certain behaviors, to be able to predetermine certain conditions which we want to better, which we want to improve, which we want to make our architecture speak to the user and facilitate its or his or her experience in that space.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a good transition point to you, Evgeny. I think the choice is a bit more clear cut in your case with regard to delivering the service. I'm not a user of Bolt, so I'm quite curious. Where is Bolt leading the ahead of the competition if you compare it to other existing services, of course, of which there is a lot? What do you think is your innovation above the state of the art? Where do you really excel?
I think I really resonate with Bogdan from the point that I also actually see technology not a goal in itself, but rather just a tool to achieve great service for our users. And we also, it was very interesting to listen to somebody from such a different field, but basically doing the same that we do, which is modeling the behavior of the users, understanding how they consume your service and how to basically build a better service for them. And I think this is actually one of the things that makes Bolt special is exactly this attitude that we are not so much about innovation. Like, yes, innovation is something that happens, has to happen for us to build better services, but we are all about serving our customers. And it translates in many different things. Like, for example, there's a very mundane thing that actually really matters in mobility, and that's price, right? And basically providing affordable pricing of affordable services is like incredibly important, right? The more affordable the service, the more available they are to people, and the more competitive the company is, right? So it's very aligned. And so I think that the two things that makes us unique, one is this absolute focus on kind of great quality at affordable price, which permeates everything we do. And the other one is just that the scope of our ambition is really to kind of unbundle the personal car. So we believe that cars are terrible. They're like the most, like my joke is that if you would have a committee design the most inefficient way to transport people from point A to point B, they would probably come up with 2 tons of metal to transport 80 kilos of living mass. And so we do it, we attack it from multiple angles. One very important thing is that where we started from is ride hailing, where we raise the car utilization, where we basically make the service more affordable, and then instead of standing 95% of the time, now those cars are utilized like 80% of the time. The second big direction for us was to build micromobility. So which I really love scooters. I really love electric scooters because from my perspective, the pinnacle of transport innovation, because there's nothing you can take away from an e-scooter. Like it's absolutely minimalistic way to move around in the city. There's just nothing you can take away and still have a safe, convenient device, right? And so they're like an amazing form of innovation, and we're at the forefront of that. And then the third component for us, which we just actually launched last week, was car sharing service, right? Because we really see cars like that. One of the way to unbundle the car is attack from the short distances, attack with micromobility, from the long distances attack with car sharing, so that you would have an affordable, kind of very shared, highly utilized, again, like asset, or in this case, vehicle, right? And then like in the middle, you provide ride hailing, and those three together, we really hope that, that this will help cities to move away from cars, right? That people will stop having this personal ownership. And just to finish up, getting back to your point, how we differ is, I think we're actually the only platform which combines these three services, and also food delivery and other grocery delivery and so on. And it's actually incredibly important for one company to provide those three services, because they're very interesting synergies exactly on the operation side, which again translate to a more affordable service and better quality for everybody. So that's I think our vision is still quite a bit different from others in that.
And for the, so I agree with you about the cars, but I think the reality is that cars have defined the way the cities are, and that's the reality we're facing. Do you see micromobility already redefining the cities, the way they're planned, the way they're used?
That is really the hope, right? And there's like micromobility basically makes the radius that is accessible from your home without sitting into a car like much longer, right? And that means that that instead of like a 15-minute walk, now you can have a 15-minute scooter drive, but that's like 4 times higher radius, which means just like as we have this very interesting trends in the cities where decentralization is combined with these new transportation modes, that we like I really hope to see, and I really would want to know what Bogdan is thinking about that, to see this more islands in the city, right? These areas where all the services are available and where you never need to sit into a car or even in public transport to access it. So that's
Bogdan. And yeah, when you're working design projects now, I mean, before you build, for example, an office building, you have to have parking there, right? How do you do it now? Do you already conceptualize? Okay, we need to have room or allowances for scooters, for bicycles, for you name it. Is that the part of the design process today?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, as Yevgeny was saying, by scaling down and going to micromobility, because we were talking earlier, right, and exchanging ideas about the 15-minute city and so on. I mean, these are concepts which have been around since the early 1900s, and then now people are just slowly starting to tap into them. And, there are concepts of 15-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute cities, but it really depends on the infrastructure that you have. And back in 2017, for example, we did a project for London, which was called Walkable London, in which we tried to map all the connections that exist in London and what that gives you. And we figured out that actually 15 minutes is perfect for London, because it actually offers that when you start taking into account all the tube stations. I'm not saying that the tube service is perfect in London, which is not. But then, when you add to that micromobility, you just make things happen in a much faster way, and you make that much more accessible for people, right? Because people maybe don't want to walk 15 minutes all the time, but if they have to then scoot those 15-minute walk into a 2-minute, 5-minute, then it becomes really, really exciting, right? And then when you add to that functional mixity, as Yevgeny was saying, decentralizing and maybe creating smaller clusters of mixed-use functionality, then give you more, because people always want to have everything around them, right? People don't want to move. I mean, that's just fact. If you can move less and have everything around you, that would be perfect, right? So then obviously we do integrate all of these ideas in all of our designs and try to come up with new ways of articulating things. And also one of the things which we were dealing with was how to actually redefine the home environment by creating almost like an app-based living system where users could then customize the way that they would want to live together and create that as a modular living system. So, I mean, these are ideas that we can, obviously, we're open to collaborate with anybody else who wants to tap into this, and always up for collaboration inside the architects. Yeah, I mean, just to answer briefly your question is, yes, of course, we do, scale down on parking and scale up on bicycle parking and all the rest of the, mobility, let's say, storage space that we need for the projects. And this has been a trend and is a trend. And we are observing that in all projects that we do, that people need less and less and less cars. And, you always think, okay, there's electrical cars, and then there's car sharing, and then there are all these other ways that you need to look at things, and then you need to see in the perspective of 20 or 30 years time and say, okay, so what do you do? You do need by regulations, because regulations in cities don't allow you to not have parking in your developments, because that's against the rules. So you do need to do that, but then you need to think, okay, well, what can I do with that parking space in the time of 15 to 20 years to, even in 10 years time, when mobility is going to be so much more diversified than it is now. So then you have to think abstractly to how you relocate and functionalize those spaces. And it's exciting times. Change is always exciting because it gives you new ways of thinking about things.
So maybe, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think there's a couple more extremely interesting trends going on, and one of them is kind of the gift of the pandemic. That obviously there'll be a lot more remoting in the future, like remote work happening, right? And so I don't believe that most companies will go fully remote, but a lot of them will be hybrid remote, right? So a few days in the office, a few days at home. And and with effective telecommunication, like as proven by our current presentation, it's quite possible. And right, and this takes away another reason to go somewhere, right? It takes away another reason to travel. So hopefully the trips in the city overall will go down. Another very interesting trend is the rise of the delivery services, and not just food delivery, but also e-commerce, right? So basically all the grocery delivery. So again, it's another it's one reason less to travel to like big centers like malls, right? Because which usually you took a car with you because you had to transport a lot of stuff. So yet another reason, like one less reason why you have to get out from your area, from kind of this 15-minute living space. And and again, this is kind of was enabled by so the transportation services are changing, right? The way we work is changing, the way we move goods is changing, the way we shop is changing, but they all combine together in hopefully an increase of quality of life for everybody, right? For better experience in the cities, and as Vladimir said, like the cars have defined what the city looks like for the last, well, what is it, close to 150 years. And now I think, the hope is that all that transformation will mean that that train will come to an end.
One thing that we touched upon in the conversation before this panel was, the way transportation is used in different countries. And whenever I travel, whenever we all used to travel, I try to make use of these really specific local means of transportation, like jeepneys in Manila or things like that. Are you looking at them? Do you think that's something that should be integrated and used, in your system, or you think, okay, everybody's using electric scooters, they're cool, they're fancy, they're the best, let's just try to disseminate them as much as possible?
We do experiment with like kind of different modes and options, and like mopeds are very interesting, like very popular in Asian countries, and in other, and like obviously or
tuk-tuks. The electric ones.
Yeah, we actually have tuk-tuks in Thailand, as far as I know.
Very cool.
Yeah, and and so it's like we want to experiment. Like two-wheelers generally are very interesting because just considering like the traffic is such a problem, two-wheelers are so much better at that. And there's some more kind of long shot alternatives. Like I keep an eye like on air travel, right? And there's a lot of startups trying to make it work. I personally think it's more of a premium service. I just think that still the ground service will have much better pricing, just because you expend less energy, and like it's the device itself is kind of easier. But they're like, and then there's tunneling, like literally building 3D networks in our city. All of them are very, very interesting. But
how about water? We talk about either ground usually or air, and there are lots of things to wait for in this space. But cities have been built on water historically. Look at any major cities. There is water. There are rivers, canals, oceans, lakes, and we're not using that.
Yeah, I will be honest. I have not thought a lot about water. But I think it's very, very city dependent, right? It probably will work very well in Amsterdam to have like some kind of a water taxi.
You take even Paris. Still, you can do a lot by water in Paris, or the great lake cities.
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff there as well. Yeah, what my belief is that a lot more will be kind of done by this boring application of technology which we already have, and just keep scaling it, keep like kind of raising the adoption by sharing those. Like a lot can be done. Like the cities can literally be transformed without a single innovation happening, right? Just having the technology we have right now, because it's adopted like to 2% of its capacity, and I think that is the biggest kind of transformation. It's underappreciated how big the transformation will be once it's complete.
Does this apply to all cities in the world? So for example, I just came back from Dubai. Now it's so hot over there. You cannot be using bikes or scooters or anything in the streets. Just impossible. You're going to fry to death. What do we do with the cities where these solutions are just not feasible?
Well, you can still raise the car utilization, right? And say, like again, like if you can reduce the fleet of cars 5x, right, 5 times, then it's a pretty big improvement for the city, right? And then you suddenly need like significantly smaller roads, and you can suddenly need like a completely different infrastructure. But yeah, I don't have I don't have an answer for Dubai specifically. There's some experiments also with light electric vehicles, which can have air conditioning, but which just are much lighter, much smaller. And the biggest problem there to this point is just safety, because the main reason why cars are like they are, it's so inefficient, is because to transport safely somebody at these big speeds, you really need a lot of like this framework and weight and so on. And so that's the biggest kind of, if we could figure out like how to separate those light electric vehicles, give them their own roads, like, build a separate infrastructure, or like reduce, separate the current vehicles to like very specific infrastructure, then this could work, right? And then we could have a completely different setup.
Clear. Bogdan, is that something that you can do? Because a firm of your caliber defines the future in a way, how the buildings are going to look like in the coming years. Do you have the freedom or the flexibility to push back against developers or your clients saying, well, actually the cars are bad for you, so let's design, the building, and let's not allow cars, or, radically limit that? Have you seen that working, or you have to follow the brief?
It's kind of a twofold approach, because yes, obviously the client is the one who asks of you things which you need to do. But then there are various regulations in place which obviously also limit what those requirements from the client are. But then there's your experience and expertise, and I think that it's up to you at the end of the day to prove that one approach is better than the other one. And obviously these are fights which one needs to fight, but they're fights which are worth having. And of course, we always try to integrate all the newest and best practice technologies at the end of the day. But it's not as straightforward as, let's say that if one client asks you to do something, you need to do specifically that, and you cannot go around it, or you impose yourself on the client and so on. I think, with architecture is a bit, it's like any other service at the end of the day. It's a negotiation between things. It's not black and white. And then I think we need to rely on common sense, I guess. But
okay.
So that, just to add to your question about Dubai, like there are specific places on this planet which obviously are harder to inhabit than others. And there are places like in China where are required by law to offer shaded spaces, and also in other Middle Eastern countries where we have projects, you are required to provide shading spaces for walking,
right,
and so on, right? Then there's this project of Elon Musk with the Hyperloop, then that obviously covers bigger distances in more controlled environments. Then if you look at car sharing, as Yevgeny was saying, you can look at electric vehicles. Obviously, there's so many ways in which you can play with solving the way that people move around. But ultimately, I guess, we all need to just make sure that we deploy all the most sensible tools and practices in the way that we're solving this.
One final question I have, looking at time. This compartmentalization that we're talking about, and this shift out of the cities that you expect might happen, maybe driven by a pandemic, maybe by other reasons, would it keep the cities still interesting and entertaining and worth discovering, or would it make all the cities kind of similar to each other? Isn't there a risk over there?
I can only have a very personal opinion, but I don't think that the city will ever die, because people want to, at the end of the day, nobody wants to live in isolation, or at least I would like to believe so. So, of course, it's just a way of us figuring out what is the best way to live together, and maybe rush less, because many of the ways that we live now is because of time dependency and how we need to access and tap into resources, and it's just about figuring out a smarter way of going around that, I guess. But I don't think that the city is ever going to die, and I just think it's going to evolve at most.
Perfect. I think that's the perfect moment for us to stop over here on this note about the way to move around the city smarter. I think we agree that the transportation has defined the city, will define it further, and whatever new ways we'll find out. Fighting the commute, I think, is really, really a great thing to do, because many people commute for way too long, and I hope we'll find new solutions for that. Thank you much for joining. Thank you for discussing this subject. And Stuart, I'm handing it back over to you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to everybody. That was a really fascinating conversation, and really appreciate it. So everybody, we're now going to move on to the next session in a couple of moments. So don't forget to end this one and go on to the next one at the main stage, where we're going to be talking about a really interesting subject. It's about remote work, because of course we're all talking about that right now.
Perfect.
But don't forget,
perfect bridge.
Don't forget that you can use that left sidebar in Pine to go network and communicate with people. This is your chance to use the network and to link up with other attendees. But we have amazing sessions. Continue to look out for the rockets in case you can win that prize from Shivas. But once again, thank you to Vladimir, Yevgeny, and Bogdan, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you to everyone attending the Emerge today.
Thank you, and enjoy your day.